This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm joined once again by the wonderful Jill Bucaro, who's joining us all the way from Georgia. How are you today, Jill?
I'm good, Jamie. How are you?
I am fantastic, enjoying the summer and enjoying the bounty of produce that one finds at farmers markets. So today we're going to be speaking about farmers markets. What was
Yes.
your first introduction to farmers markets, Jill?
When I was in college, I went to school at the University of Wisconsin, and there was a big farmers market around the Capitol every Saturday. And so I learned about it. It was Saturday morning. So as a college student, I didn't go all the time.
Right. Okay.
But when I did, I really started to like enjoy the just being there,
Yeah.
like the excitement and the people. And as a good farmers market, customer, I would come home with cheese curds,
Oh yeah.
apple cider, and bread. No
I've been there.
produce to speak
I've been
of.
there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so that was my introduction. And then, living so many years in Southern California,
Mhm.
I mean, they were just all over the place. So really got used to shopping there on a regular basis.
I can remember loving one of my first introductions to a North American farmers market, a proper one, would have been the one at the one in San Francisco at the ferry building there.
Hmm.
And I can remember just being blown away by the amount of produce, the quality of the produce, some of the most amazing cheeses I've ever had,
Yeah,
and kind of wishing that that was available in Toronto. And at that time, which would have been, well, 20 years ago, it really wasn't for that. I mean, I'm sure
yeah,
there were some farmers markets, but it wasn't something that we saw too much of in the intervening years, of course. When I lived in
yeah,
Toronto, there was the establishment of some really fantastic farmers markets in the city. Two that
yeah.
I would go to a lot would be the Dufferin Grove farmers markets and farmers market and Trinity Bellwoods farmers market, and I came to love those. And those became a regular excursion for us. And Elliot or some would enjoy it because you get to taste test a whole lot of
Yes,
stuff, cheeses and sausages and the like. So do you go to the farmers market where you are in Georgia every week now?
I do. Yeah, there's one close to me in Peachtree City, but there's also several in Atlanta proper. So we live just outside of the city, and we go to one almost every week. One of them. A
Right.
lot of them are on the weekends, so we try to rotate. But the good news is that almost wherever you are listening to this, there's either going to be a farmers market or there recently has been one added, or you're not that far away from one because there's about 9,000 in the U.S. right now running farmers markets,
Right.
which I think maybe over the last 20 years has increased from maybe 2 to 4,000. So I mean, really like big cities, rural areas. My mom lives in a small town in Wisconsin with 3,500 people, and they have a weekly farmers market. So I really think the opportunity for all of us to experience one is growing, which I love.
For those people who perhaps don't visit farmers markets on a regular basis, how would you entice them to take that step? I mean, what are the advantages to shopping at a farmers market as opposed to, say, a supermarket?
Yeah, so there's a couple of benefits that I can think of, and one is the taste of the products or the produce mostly. I would say at the farmers market, but really other products too. The taste
Mhm.
comes along with being nutrient dense. So you have like a higher nutrient density for the items that are at a farmers market, which increases the taste. So nutrient density and great taste usually go hand in hand. And that comes along with growing things seasonally and locally. So what is grown, in your area and likely was picked, either that day or the day before. So there's a lot of benefits, from like a health standpoint, but also just enjoyment. A tomato at a farmer's market in season, there's just nothing like it. Or strawberries. So I always laugh when people don't think they like tomatoes or they don't think they like berries. And like, you haven't had, really fresh, delicious in season berries. When I was a kid, I mean, things were truly seasonal. So I grew up in the
Yes.
Midwest. Like, we didn't have watermelon and strawberries in the winter because they just didn't grow. And now, for better or for worse, we can have anything almost all year long. It doesn't mean that it's the best tasting or, it's the freshest or it's the most nutrient dense, but we can have it, right? You can have a watermelon in December. It's just who knows where it came from, right? So from that point of view, it can be beneficial to go to a farmer's market and also like environmentally beneficial. So the average produce travels about 1,500 miles from where it's grown to where it's purchased. And so a farmer's market, you're not going to have that. It's usually locally grown. So again, like within your area. And it gives you an opportunity to support small business or local businesses, local farmers, which I just think is lovely.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, I'm not sure if this is ever an issue at the farmers markets that you have frequented, but quite often in Ontario, there will be a farmers market. You will assume that everything is from within 100 kilometers, say, all local. But there are often stalls, and if you look a little bit further, you'll see stuff that isn't actually grown in Ontario. So they actually go to the food terminal, purchase their stuff, and then bring it to these farmers markets. So quite often there are items that are not so local. Do you have the same thing?
I think that does happen sometimes, and what I love about farmers markets is you get the opportunity to talk to the
Yes.
person
Yep. Yep.
at that stand. Like, I've never gone to a grocery store and asked the cashier, like, "Oh, where are those strawberries from?" They
Sure.
don't
Yeah.
know. So you do have an opportunity to ask, and I think that's a really good point. Just because it's at a farmer's market doesn't mean it's local, but it's much more likely to be
Sure.
local, at a farmer's market as opposed to the local grocery store. Some markets even have, I mean, stipulations or parameters around what
I
they
see.
will allow in their market. So I think it varies. In some of the warmer climates where they have, the luxury of growing year round,
Yes.
there's probably less of that, but it
Sure.
doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, if you're seeing bananas at a farmer's market in Ontario, like you can
Yeah.
probably want to question that vendor. But that's one of the great things, is you can talk to them and what are their growing practices if you're interested. And that's another thing that, it doesn't necessarily mean because it's at a farmer's market that it's organic, you know,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
just because it's not listed as organic doesn't mean they aren't growing or using organic practices. So for those of you who don't know, at least here in the States, it costs money and quite a bit of money for farmers to get certified organic.
Yeah. Same
So
here.
they
Yeah.
need to, yeah. So they need to, follow all these rules and have, X number of years without using, sprays and chemicals, et cetera. So it costs a lot of money, which small farms sometimes they just don't want to pay that. But it doesn't mean they don't grow it that way. So that's another conversation that you can have is, do you use sprays? Do you use chemicals? And a lot of times, if they don't have that certified organic, they will have a sign that says no sprays or free, pesticide free. So you can still feel good about eating that, just understanding that they just maybe didn't have the funds or didn't want to pay for that certification.
A question I often get about farmers markets, actually in local food in general, is to do with the cost. Now, we're still going through this cost of living crisis in the Western world and actually throughout much of the world. How do you find, open-ended question here, but how do you find the price comparisons between shopping at, say, a supermarket or a farmer's market?
So I find it to not be consistent. I
Right,
find it
right.
varies a little bit. So, for example, I can find a beautiful bunch of organic kale for $2 or $3 at a farmer's market, where at the store, non-organic kale might be $3 or $4. So that's something that I can find usually less expensive at a farmer's market. But there's other things that that's not the case. So what I do is I always go to the farmer's market first, in my week of shopping or my shopping day or whatever my routine is. And I see what I can get, at the prices that I'm willing to pay, what's a good value. And then I wrap that up or supplement with the grocery store. The things that tend to be less expensive at the farmer's market are seasonal
Yes,
items. So
for sure.
when farmers have a ton of zucchini, it's cheap. When farmers have a ton of tomatoes, they tend to be less expensive. So, and that's one of the things I love about farmers markets is it really does tell you what's seasonal. And you really
Very
can
much so.
shop for what's seasonal. And again, the seasonal things tend to be the best tasting and the most nutrient dense. So that's, pricing seems to be hit or miss. It depends. But the one thing I will say too is like when I buy kale or lettuces or tomatoes at the farmer's market, they last a lot
I
longer
was about to say that. Yep, yep.
than what they do when I buy, a bag of lettuce, for example, or a bag of kale at the grocery store. I mean, I can get 2 weeks or more out of my kale or my lettuces that I buy from the farmer's market. And sometimes within days of buying greens at the grocery store,
Yep.
they're already kind of slimy. So, in the US, we throw out about 40% of our food between the grocery stores and homes and everything. So if you can pay a little bit more, but you actually get the length of use and you're throwing out less, then the cost up front seems more, but really overall, it's either a
Agreed.
savings or you're breaking even.
Now, do you also have a proliferation of scented candles, embroidered things, and fudge at farmers markets? The reason I ask is I went to a farmers market in Tobermory a few years back, and there was one vegetable stall, one produce stall, and the rest was fudge and scented candles, I think. Do you have the same thing at farmers markets?
Yes, you know what? I tend to find that is a couple things. One is that if they're just starting,
Yes.
like if it's a new farmer's market, and they have limited vendors, but they want to kind of like, look like they're offering more. You'll see things like breads, sauces, jams and jellies,
Yes. Oh,
nuts,
yeah.
seeds, flours, body, personal care products, etc. And the other one that I know I see that is in um, climates where the growing season is shorter, but they want to start having, farmers markets
Yes.
early in the season as they can. So then it's like, yes, it's maple syrup and, a lot of other things. So, and I think sometimes there's just, sometimes it's fun to look for that stuff too. So even in the larger farmers markets, where there's multiple, produce growers or vendors, I always think it's fun to look for the other things like, the cheeses and the breads and pastries,
For
nuts,
sure.
seeds, and things like that. But yes, some candles for sure.
Now, I'm thinking we are going to be going to a farmer's market tomorrow. I think there's one in Meaford tomorrow, so that will be on the road to the cottage. Actually, no, it's on Saturday, so I'll get it on the way back.
Okay.
If I were a novice farmer's market goer, what kind of advice would you give me when I get there? If I'm kind of lost in this flurry of produce and fudge and scented candles, where would you guide me? How would you advise me to adventure into this thing?
Yes. So one thing I do like to suggest is to get there early because
Right?
there are like some people that, they know what they want, they get there and, they have a limited supply. It's not like they have a back room. And so sometimes, the popular vendors will sell out. So if the market opens at 9, I suggest getting there early if it's your first time so you truly can see what the market offers before, vendors sell out. I recommend walking around once before you buy anything. So, if it's easy to be like, oh, tomatoes, oh, flowers, oh, and then you get two vendors down and you're like, oh, they're $1 less a pound here. So I always suggest just giving, one walk around and then, deciding what you want, being open and flexible. So you can go there with a list, but definitely being
Yeah.
flexible. If asparagus isn't in season, can you get green beans or et cetera, right? So being open and flexible. You can ask for samples a lot of times, especially with like, peaches and berries, they'll have samples so you can really taste, what you're about to buy. So those are some of the things that, I suggest, if you're going for the first time, and then truly like know that you can talk to the person on the other side of the table. I have learned the like coolest stuff. I mean, what a pluot was. I learned that Brussels sprouts grow on a big stalk. I've learned about different kinds of mushrooms, sprouts. I mean, they're happy most of the times. They're
Oh, yeah.
happy to talk to you about it, where they grow, what makes them special. It's a family farm, whatever that is. So I definitely think like the idea of the conversation with the person that's selling you the product is key.
Excellent. Well, hopefully you will have a good weekend and a good visit to your own local farmers market, Jill. And I will
Yep,
report back on my trip to Meaford Farmers Market the very first time. Thank you very much for
please
joining us.
do.
Good food revolution, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
Okay, bye, Jamie.